My dear colleague, Professor Aurel from the Institute of Politics, will chair the session. Aurel,
Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks so much. It's great. Welcome to Heidelberg. It's great to have so many distinguished colleagues and fine scholars here in this room, and especially two very prominent presenter speakers in this first panel. My name is Aurel. As I learned from I knew it before, but in the program, I'm the former dean of the Faculty of Economics and Social Science. I believe the post-dean life is good. That's much better than dean. That much I can tell you. I'm not a South Asia person. I'm a political scientist working on democracy and authoritarianism in Southeast and East Asia. I have a particular interest in this topic because I happen also to be the co-editor-in-chief of the journal Democratization together with Jeff Haynes, and this is of course one of the topics that's focusing or figuring very prominently in our journal. Today we have two papers, two speakers, two presenters on this panel, and I guess it wouldn't be necessary to say much about both of them, but because it's just the way we are supposed to do it, I will briefly introduce our two very distinguished speakers, and then we'll have the two presentations, followed by a Q&A comment, and in advance with your questions or comments. Be as concise, precise, and brief as possible. So number one, the first speaker today is Mr. Shankar Aiyar, a well-known politician, former career civil servant and diplomat, member of parliament and cabinet minister from the Indian National Congress, also, as I understand, a very prominent voice in political life in India currently, and a social activist as well. And the second speaker in this panel is Mander, who is a human rights and peace activist, writer, and lecturer. He's also the director of the Center for Equity Studies in India. And as I understand, he's currently Richard von Weizsäcker Fellow with the Robert Bosch Academy. And our first distinguished speaker, Mr. Shankar Aiyar, will speak about the future of Indian democracy. And Dr. Mander will then speak about the question, where did India go wrong? Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I should begin by thanking Professor Rahul Mukherjee and his team at the Center for organizing this interesting conversation at just the right time. I'm honored to be the first speaker. So when the actual election results turned the exit poll predictions topsy-turvy, we had a week of euphoria in which we thought we, the people, had rescued democracy, forestalled democratic backsliding, curtailed authoritarianism, reined in a potential dictator, saved our constitution, revived the indispensable institutions which constitute the scaffolding of our democracy, brought Parliament back to life, and ensured that draft legislation is referred to Parliamentary Standing Committee for domain experts to scrutinize in interaction with sitting serving MPs. We thought the misuse of investigative and enforcement agencies would see that the Election Commission of India would be reconstituted to play its role as a neutral empire. That the age of what we in India call the Godi media, that is the lapdog media, had ended, and that free media would speak up. That Islamophobic communalism and vigilante terrorism had been shown up for the inhuman menace they are, and the country restored to fundamental decency as expressed in our fundamental constitutional rights and embedded in our civilizational heritage. We expected the delegitimization of institutions by political capture to stop, and the weaponization of state power to be arrested. Above all, we thought the pall of fear that had enveloped our country for the past decade had lifted. And I, somewhat foolishly, proclaimed that Hinduism as a religion had been snatched back from the jaws of Hindutva, which is not a religion, but a political ideology. An emeritus professor of philosophy from Delhi University, Dr. Vijay Tadkar, drew attention to the parallel between the Modi hubris and Aeschylus's play, The Persians, which depicts the Persian emperor Xerxes, quote, combining foolishness with arrogance to invade Greece, and finding when he is beaten back, but restored to his throne, as Modi has been, that the people, quote, no longer curb their tongue, for a strong yoke has been removed. That was how we viewed the election result. Modi, on the other hand, does not see the results that way. For him, nothing has changed. He is not contrite. He still believes he is not a biological being, but an instrument of divinity. He does not appear to reckon with the erosion in his personal popularity. He continues with his high-handedness, his setting of one section of society against another. He continues to believe that cobbling together a coalition of opportunists constitutes a mandate for him to continue being himself. He demonstrates every intention of further consolidating his rule and his personality cult. This, as I will argue, is both a threat to the future of our democracy, as well as an opportunity for definitively defeating him to really restore our democracy. The question is, will the opposition remain divided and cowed down, or will it seize the opportunity to convert their current electoral gains into unambiguous victory? And second, related to this, how will civil society respond to the challenge and the opportunity? Let us first note that, brushing aside his party's reversals, Modi has sworn in virtually every previous ministerial colleague of importance, including the dreaded Home Minister, Amit Shah. He has distributed minor portfolios to his major coalition partners and resisted their request for the position of Speaker of the House. Clearly, he has no intention to loosen his iron proxy grip on the running of the House and the longevity of elected members of Parliament. He'll continue arbitrarily getting rid of anyone he doesn't like, as he did with Mohammed Shah in the last House. Despite the election having revealed that his demonizing of the minorities has lost much of its popular appeal, there is no Muslim in the Council of Ministers for the first time since independence. This is in a country, I imagine, for the benefit of everybody, that we have a 14 to 15% Muslim minority, constituting in absolute numbers nearly 200 million Indians, which is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 times the size of the German population. There continues also to be a huge preponderance of upper caste members of parliament in his party, despite caste and caste reservations having been the key issues in the elections. And if Christophe Jacquelot is recognizing some of these phrases, it's because I have borrowed them without attribution.
More than welcome.
The eminent writer and activist Arundhati Roy has been charged under the draconian UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and threatened with imprisonment without bail. For what? For a speech she made 14 years ago. 14 years ago. We should be investigated under our normal criminal law. They've been unable to find anything against her. So instead of withdrawing the case, they've now added the additional charge under a law which does not allow bail and involves sentences that go up to life imprisonment. In Kashmir, the harsh Dogra era Enemy Agents Ordinance, first promulgated in 1917, 107 years ago, has been again invoked. The Delhi Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal, has been granted bail only to have it set aside by a higher court almost immediately. And despite winning his seat from prison after 8 years of continuing incarceration, engineer Sheikh Abdul Rashid, who won his seat, defeating the former chief minister of Kashmir and the grandson of Sheikh Abdullah, that is Omar Abdullah, he still does not know whether he'll be released on bail to take his oath and attend parliament, or whether he'll have to perform his duties as the member of parliament for Baramulla in North Kashmir from jail or as a free man. The 3 new criminal procedure codes, which have been endowed with highly Sanskritized names to remove the stain of the colonial mindset, include, however, colonial crimes like sedition. The laws are to be enforced without further discussion in the new parliament. Despite the demonstration in Shaheen Bagh, CAA, the highly communalized Citizenship Amendment Act, is to be implemented with no further consideration in the newly constituted parliament. And notwithstanding Manipur having rejected the ruling BJP in both its constituencies, inner and outer Manipur, ethnic fires in the sensitive border state continue to be stoked and have spread to Jiribam district on the other side of the mountains, which abuts the neighboring state of Assam. Jiribam has hitherto been immune from the incandescence in other districts of Manipur. Nonetheless, the Prime Minister adamantly refuses to visit the disturbed state and continues with its highly incompetent and highly communalized BJP chief minister. But in the same breath, the West Bengal Chief Minister is not even consulted on talks with Bangladesh on the sharing of the Tisra waters, which are vital to livelihood in North Bengal. And two non-resident French journalists have been forced to leave the country. I quote them, not the government. Been forced to leave the country, and their overseas citizen of India status stands withdrawn, despite both of them being long married to Indian spouses. And finally, the reinducted union minister, cabinet minister, called Giriraj Singh from Bihar, has not been pulled out for saying he too will do nothing for his Muslim constituents, because by not voting for him, they have, and I quote his immortal words, quote, weakened Sanatana, that is Hinduism, to bring in Ghazwa in Islamic Hindustan to Bharat. This from a union cabinet minister who served 5 million years already and is now being given the right to serve another 5 years. And all that I have been reciting for the last minute or two has happened in just the last 3 weeks. In just the last 3 weeks. I'm not citing history. I'm citing what is happening contemporaneously. Tout ça change, tout c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Like the Bourbon monarchs, Modi has learned nothing and forgotten nothing. So, what are the challenges Modi faces in his third term, and how is he likely to respond to them? Reportedly, I don't have confirmation of this, but reportedly, more than half his MPs are defectors from the Congress and other India parties. Yet, he wishes away the volcanic discontent this is caused in his party and the larger political ecosystem of his, which is called the Sankariya. The metaphor I have used, if I may say so, is well chosen, because volcanoes simmer until they suddenly erupt. While he welcomes dissenters from other parties with open arms, he has been consistent to his creed of never accommodating dissent within the BJP. But then how will he accommodate the distress, disappointment, and worse of the many sitting BJP MPs to whom tickets have been denied? And more importantly, their armies of hangers-on who have been left in the lurch. Are they waiting like usurpers through history for their moment to strike? His relations with the bulwark of his party, the RSS, have never been worse. He believes he has long liberated himself from the BJP, and the BJP president, J.P. Mander, has publicly stated that the BJP no longer needs the RSS cadres. Both seem to forget that it was the RSS that sabotaged Vajpayee's second victory in 2004, knowing full well that it would only lead to a decade of Congress-led UPA rule. It has been widely reported that a contributory cause to Modi's loss of 63 seats in the latest general election was RSS dislike and disapproval of Modi personalizing both governance and the campaign as if he were the only issue Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me who is fairest of them all. Moreover, in just 3 days of the opening of session of the Parliament, we have seen that he gives no recognition to the plain fact that he now has to contend with a revived opposition that is snapping at his heels in a house where his majority, quote, is very fragile after, quote, the tectonic shift caused by the election, quote, again, where space has been blown open, as Rahul Gandhi told the Financial Times of London. The provocative speeches he has dictated to the Speaker and the President presage chaos in the House and continued lack of civility. The 2026 census looms. Will it be accompanied by a caste census, as is being pushed by one of his key partners, Nitish Kumar of Bihar? When India's demographic composition is revealed by the census, will the South accept being made almost redundant in Parliament? Remember, the South includes Modi's other partner, Chandrababu Naidu Vandya. If Modi accepts criteria other than population, I'm sorry, can I just take just a minute? If Modi accepts criteria other than population to determine the number of seats for any given state, will he be prepared to give up additional northern seats in his core constituencies to the benefit of states in the south, where the BJP is valued? And if he does, how would the RSS react? Indeed, how would the BJP itself react? And if he does not, will not the nascent North-South divide deepen, even to the extent of threatening the unity and integrity of Bharat? Will he then try to contain rumblings in his own ranks by passing the blame onto the fecundity of the Muslim community? Will the South accept this bogus army? Will such communal arguments appease the South? Will the South meekly accept punishment for having served the nation so much better than the North by devising imaginative measures of voluntary population control and promoting much faster and more inclusive economic development? My key question is, are we in India, where the United States of America was when Abraham Lincoln was elected? Is there a civil war? Does Modi see how fed up the South is with subsidizing the North? After the election, please note, after the election, the tax devolution to Uttar Pradesh, announced on 10 June 2024, that is 6 days after the election results, has exceeded the tax devolution to Uttar Pradesh, has exceeded the combined tax devolution to as many as 5 southern states. Does Modi recognize that the North-South divide is re-emerging as a major fault line in our polity and our nation? Or does he only perceive the dubious rise in vote share? I'm sorry, Christoph, to say that, because I know you have a different opinion. But it's a very dubious increase in vote share that is claimed by him and others in states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala as proof of the BJP becoming a national party. Does he comprehend that he has to dilute his North Indian identity if he is to continue his progress in the South? And that if he does so, he will alienate his core support in the North even more than it has already been eroded? No. 3 times Prime Minister of America is psychologically and ideologically incapable of abandoning his pursuit of virulent nationalism that does not recognize the force of subnationalism in non-Hindi speaking states. That's actually a quote from Christoph. As Professor Jaffalo said, his craze for uniformity, he continues, his craze for uniformity at the expense of federalism. So his 2014 talk of cooperative federalism has amounted, as again Christoph has said, to no more than transactional federalism. With his demonstrated preference for coercive federalism change, Nitish and Naidu will stick to him as long as he serves their purpose. But their purpose is milking the center and retaining the loyalty of their minority. So what happens to fiscal discipline, to equity of treatment between states ruled by the BJP or its allies and non-BJP states? What happens now to the Uniform Civil Code, to one nation, one election? Is there not going to be a caste census? To keep his throne from shaking, will consolidation of his Hindutva vote back suffice? If he compromises on that, will the RSS acquiesce in the abandonment of their core requirement that Hindu consolidation not be diluted by radically undermining the social stratification that has been canonized, I use the word, by the 6th century Manusmriti, which the RSS has always regarded as the true constitution of Bharat, the Hindu Rashtra. And how will Modi deflect an attack from the rear by the RSS, for which Mohan Bhagwat, the leader of the RSS, has already sounded the bugle? Will there be an RSS-sponsored Gadkari takeover? Or, sensing the attack coming, will Modi dissolve the 18th Lok Sabha that has denied the BJP a majority on its own to go back to the people in the hope that his emotional appeals to distract from real issues, his hate speech, his sly innuendos, and his dog whistling communalisms will give him back the dominant majority he yearns for. These are the dilemmas for which Modi has neither the temperament nor the past practice of resolve. He has never tolerated dissent. He has always imposed his will. Even if he has lost his absolute majority, he has not lost his outsizing vote. And as Professor Bhanu Pratap Mehta has underlined, quote, a wounded tiger is a very dangerous animal. Beyond key questions of personality and temperament, he is placed on the horns of many an ideological dilemma. The future of our democracy is uncertain, as it is only the future that will tell how Modi will respond to these challenges. Doubtless he has noted that no one of his partners can bring him down. At least two have to combine to do so. Confident that Naidu will remain if Nitish goes, and vice versa, as they can get nothing from the India alliance that Modi might prove reluctant to give. He believes he has the mandate to continue his autocratic ways. A mere electoral reversal cannot stand in the way of his favored mode of government. It will take a lobotomy to change his attitude. That will spell Modi's doom, for Modi's chutzpah is Modi's nemesis. PM Modi once warned me on the floor of Parliament that I would soon be dumped in the film of the Pune district, the forgotten and the abandoned. I look forward to Modi joining me.
I would like to hand over to Dr. Mander. Please, 20 minutes.
So friends, recent elections in India and in Europe, one of the most striking feature for me was that more and more of the world's population are choosing leaders who are teaching us to lead. And I view this, therefore, as a moment of civilizational crisis and nothing short of it. The leaders that people are choosing in more and more countries of the world foster hate, fear, resentment against oppressed minorities, have no respect for faith in democratic institutions and processes. They contribute to a precipitous decline in just the civility of public discourse. They have extreme closeness to selected big business houses. But I think what I find most significant in this range of leaders is what I would call a profound absence of public compassion. They don't care, millions are dying in COVID lockdowns. There's desperate poverty, hunger. None of that moves them. And it is this kind of leadership. And the problem is not Modi. The problem is not Trump. The problem is us. We, the people. What is happening among us? And I think that is where what I wanted to reflect. Where has India lost its way? Free India, I think, is passing through its most difficult moment since the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi in January 1948. Decades later, on January 24th this year, India's Prime Minister sort of, combined in his persona, emperor, head priest, and he presided over the consecration of a temple. It was not an ordinary temple. It was a temple that was built at the site where a mob had brought down a mosque, a 400-year-old mosque. A couple of days later, the Indian cabinet passed a resolution. The resolution was that only the body of India became free in 1947. The soul of India became free on January 24th, 2024. It set me thinking, when did the soul of my country, the country I love, when was it set free? And I go back to many things. But briefly, let me talk about the last months of Gandhiji's life. When we got our freedom, Gandhi was not in Delhi celebrating freedom. He was in Calcutta because unending slaughter was underway between Hindus and Muslims. And he said, he tried to bring peace, and in the end, he went on two of his most significant fasts. And he went on a fast, and people thought that it was impossible, that the slaughter would end. And it took just 5 days, and the violence came to a complete end. There are many stories told about this time. There's one that is very close to my heart, where a very angry man comes in. He's a Hindu man, and he tells Gandhi that what you're doing is terribly wrong. I had a child this small, and the Muslim mobs killed him. How can I overcome my hate and my anger? And Gandhi says, I understand that hate and anger, but let me tell you a way. Find a little boy this small, a Muslim boy whose parents have been killed by Hindu mobs. Adopt that child as your own, raise him in his own faith. it is, it is at a moment like that, I think my country, its soul found its freedom. After peace was restored, he came to Delhi. He was planning to go to Pakistan actually and continue the same attempt at bringing peace. But he found Delhi in complete turmoil. And in those last months, my own family is a family that was uprooted under great violence in what is now Pakistan. They had come in, the refugees were really angry. There was rage, there was hurt. And there was that idea that they have got their Pakistan, meaning Muslims have got their Pakistan, so India must be a country for its Hindu citizens. But Mahatma Gandhi and the leaders of our freedom struggle said, no, India will belong equally to people of every faith. And I think in that decision, the soul of my country found its freedom. Anis Kidwai, somebody in her memoir, she writes about coming to Gandhiji. Her husband had been killed in the violence of partitions, trying to save lives. And she came to Gandhi and found him in deep distress. And Gandhiji said something to her. He said, my work will not be complete until a Muslim child cannot play without fear in this city. My work will not be complete. And I look at India today. I've spent last many months going across the country and speaking to people of Muslim identity, and they long for this space where they can sit together in a room and speak, and they speak about so much anguish. About what has unfolded over the last 10 years. The word I hear most is fear. They say that we just live with this, this continuous feeling that your father sets out, your brother sets out, your husband, son sets out. You don't even, you have this continuous fear. Will they come back safe? And then I think about, Gandhiji saying, my work is not complete till a Muslim child cannot play without fear. His last fast, I think, was perhaps his finest moment. It was just 2 weeks before he was assassinated. The one demand is better known, that Pakistan should get its due share. Because if Pakistan hadn't got its share, it would have gone bankrupt. And he said, brothers can separate, but they're still brothers. But the other two demands is something that I wanted to remember, because I want us to understand what is the crisis that we are facing today. People were so angry, including my own extended family in all the refugee camps, displaced from their homelands forever, having lost loved ones to great violence. And one of the things they did was that they said, now there can be no mosques and dargahs. They placed idols cannot place mosques, they placed idols in the Meheroli Dargah in Delhi. And Gandhiji's second demand was that we must restore these places of worship with full respect to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And he said something very significant. He said, no true place of worship can be built on disrespect to another faith. And therefore, I have no doubt that the grand structure, which incidentally is leaking in Ayodhya, he would not have recognized that to be a temple at all. So that was his second demand. And his third was even more extraordinary. Irfan Habib talks about it, where he says that, see, the only way I've come as a refugee from Pakistan, and the only way I can get a home is if a Muslim leaves his property here. So you have a vested interest in driving out people. And he said that we must go to the Muslims who we've been driven out of their homes in the refugee camps and say, no, please come back. This is your country, this is your home. And you are then agreeing you are volunteering to go back to the refugee camp. Think of the moral courage of a moment like this. And people say that even Nehru and Patel and Maulana Azad said, there's too much anger at this time, don't make these demands. And he said, no, this is not the time. He said, no, this is the only time. And they say that, if Habib writes that the first day, 10,000 people came out in his support. By the fifth day, there were 100,000 people. All his demands were accepted. The Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS signed an agreement to return these places of worship. At that moment, the soul of my country became free. 2 weeks later, he was assassinated. And we come back to India today. There is much that has been destroyed over this last decade. But I think we must recognize that the war, it's an open war that the state has waged against its Muslim citizens, is a war actually on the idea of India itself. President Biden recently made a speech saying America is the only country in the world which is an idea more than a country. I believe India is a country that is actually an idea. We said we would build a country where it would not matter which God you worship, or if you worship no God. It would not matter what the color of your skin is, what your caste, your gender, your language, your wealth. In every respect, you're an equal person, human being, an equal citizen with equal rights of equal belonging to this land. And I realized how valuable this was in the year that I spent in Germany, with great admiration about how they tried to rebuild their society, dealing with their Nazi past. But with all that they have done, who qualifies to be a German citizen? It's almost axiomatic. No, they must know our language, they must respect our culture, there must be a way of life. The idea of India was that there should be no conditionalities. Be very comfortable, wear the clothes you want, dress what you want, speak the way, live your life, worship the way you like, just respect the values of our constitution, and we are together. It was that idea so the attack and the war of hatred that we see unfolding against India's Muslims is an attack on that idea, on the foundational idea of this country itself. And we need to recognize that it is that assault that needs to be confronted. When lynchings, we have runaway hate speech where people call for publicly for genocide and mass rape, and nothing happens. People wearing saffron, people, great political leaders, the Prime Minister himself. But even more frightening is this epidemic of lynching. And I wanted to underline how similar it is to Jim Crow's America, because lynching is performative violence. It is symbolic violence. The total number of people, I was looking at data, over 60 years were killed in Jim Crow's America was about 4,000, which is, in a single riot, we lose more people than that. But what was its impact was its performative character. And lynching today, in those days, people used to gather in picnics, children, and watch the violence as you cut off fingers of the African American and his genitals and you hang him. Here, you're replacing that performative character with the video camera. So each of these lynchings are videotaped and circulated to millions. And it is just this idea that, that one person is just slowly beaten to death by a mob. And almost all of these videos end with, when you've lost a lot of blood, the last thing you say is, can you give me some water? And they refuse to give you water, and that person dies. So what you're doing is communicating a message. And in post-2019, of course, we saw that this has been overtaken by the state. You don't even need the lynch mob anymore. Now the state does demolitions, the state does killings. A few months ago, a railway constable walked into a train and he killed his superior officer. And then he went and he found, taking time, people of ostensible Muslim identity and shot 3 of them. And then he gave a speech to a video saying, I'm doing this for Modi and Yogi. The next morning, I have a young Muslim colleague and she came into my office and she was sobbing. And I sat her down, I said, what's happened? She said, I can't sleep, I can't think since I got this news. And I said, why? And she said, it could have been my father. It could have been my brother. And then, I wrote an article saying the speech that Mr. Modi did not make. So the speech was how anguished I am that this has happened and that I want to assure my Muslim brothers and sisters that this country belongs equally to you. I did some quick research and I found that even Trump had made a speech like this after George Floyd, and Macron had made this speech when the teenager was killed by the police. But our Prime Minister didn't feel the need to make this speech. We started something called Karwan-e-Mohabbat or Caravan of Love to respond. And why did I feel that we needed to respond? Because I realized that the problem is not Mr. Modi, it's our radicalization. It's the radicalization of the Hindu heart and mind that we are seeing, and it's massively grown. And it is that radicalization that has to be answered. And so, I thought we'd learn again from Gandhi. What did Gandhi do when the massacre started? Holi was first to go to the people who were affected and to say, I care, and to share their pain. And I said, let's do that. Let's go to every home. And started off as one journey, but it's now been, I think, 40 journeys, and it just won't end. And in every home, what we do, we first say, we share your pain, and you cry together. And then you say, we seek forgiveness for what we've become as a people. Thirdly, that we pledge to be with you, whatever happens. We are here together as you fight for justice, as you rebuild your life, and we will tell your story. Because I find that acknowledgement is extremely important for people who suffer this. In these journeys, some of the things, and I wanted to just leave you with that, and if I have time, I'll speak a little more. One of the things that people start telling us, and this has happened, now there are more than 100 families that we have visited and we're working with. They say, we wish they just shot him. We wish they just stabbed him. Why did they torture him so much? Why did they gouge out his eyes? Why did they smash his genitals? What is this hatred that has got unleashed among us? We the people. That is what troubles me. And until we recognize this, and that this civilizational crisis that we need, I would keep asking, somebody must have intervened to help you. I mean, almost begging, please tell me somebody tried to save you. And there was never a story of somebody trying to intervene. That civilizational crisis is what I think Mr. Modi has succeeded in unleashing among us. This slow drip of normalized hate, which we're getting through these phones every single day. It's not like once you get this intoxicating hate, you're getting it every morning, evening, night, whenever you look. It is this everyday hate, and in the intoxication of this hate, everything is acceptable to me. Hunger is acceptable to me. Joblessness is acceptable to me. I'm so intoxicated with the hate that everything else is gone. And this is what we call populist leaders. I think that's probably an inappropriate name. The leaders who are teaching us to hate have learned this very well. Nobody will question you about your failures on the economy, on jobs, on prices, if they're so intoxicated by hate. So the great thing that Rishi Sunak is doing is planning to take immigrants off and sending them off to Rwanda. I mean, like, he was twice an immigrant, and that's where he's ended up. It's this power against the most powerless is what we are selling And that's giving me so much satisfaction that I don't need anything more. So where we got to this place of darkness, the many failures of secular parties lacking ideological conviction, of democratic institutions created to hold the executive accountable, they have failed, but the culpability of silence, of indifference, of tacit and open support for the project of hate of ordinary people, that I think where does hope lie? And I'm sort of looking at the two minutes finger and trying to sort of ignore it. I just speak for a minute on where I think hope lies. I think hope lies in a certain word which is problematic enough, maybe fraternity. And Dr. Ambedkar had explained to us why fraternity is the foundation of our constitution. He said justice, liberty, equality are possible without fraternity, but it has to be then enforced by the state. But if there's fraternity, then justice, liberty, equality become the natural order of things. What is fraternity? Brotherhood, and that's the problem where does sisterhood and other genders go. But the Hindi word for fraternity is beautiful in the constitution. It's a word called bandhuta. Bandhuta literally means in Sanskrit, we are tied to and with each other. We may worship differently, we may look differently, we may speak different languages, but we belong to and with each other. And Noam Chomsky somewhere spoke about a good society. And it's a line, some of the most profound ideas are the simplest. He said a good society is one in which we take care of each other. A society in which we take care of each other. That is what fraternity is. It means that if there are fetters on your feet, I feel my freedom has been stolen away. If a Dalit girl has been gang raped, I mourn as if it is my own daughter. If a young boy has been lynched as he was on a train, my spontaneous response was to write an article saying, Hafiz Junaid was my son. I didn't know him when he was alive. His way of life was very different from mine. In the way he was killed, I mourn him like my son. That is my fraternity. That is what we have to find. We have to find back or find our capacities to care for each other. Where your pain is intolerable to me, where injustice to you is intolerable to me. And I just will end with a story. I can try to say which story. The New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. What did she do when a young man went with live streaming as he went into 2 mosques and killed 50 people who were worshipping? Her first response was, she said, I'll never mention the name of this man, because he's not New Zealand. The people he killed were, and they were only 1.5% Muslim, all immigrants, but they represent New Zealand. That was the first thing. Second, she did exactly what spontaneously Gandhiji did and what we tried to do in the Karam, was to go to the families and demonstrate how much she cares. She covered her head in cultural solidarity, she embraced, and you could see that she was sharing their pain. Next, Friday, they announced that the azan was sounded on all television and radio stations. Women, newsreaders, police women across the country covered their heads as a sign of solidarity. People gathered outside the mosques and held hands together, and they said, you pray and we will stand guard. The Imam of the mosque said, when people asked him, he said, by what has happened, we are broken-hearted, but we are not broken. New Zealand has taught us what it means to love. I think the problem with most of us, and in my country, is that we are not broken-hearted. We don't care, which shows how broken we've become. And it is that, when young people ask me, if there's one advice that you can give us, what should we do? I actually say, just be kind. And I don't want anything more. You have no huge courage, just care. And then we'll find the next steps. can we regain our capacity to care when I see pain and suffering around me? Lastly, especially my Muslim brothers and sisters across the country, and say, what is our solution? And they want me to say, this one should align with this one, and this should happen, this should happen. I say, you're missing the point. It's us that we'll have to deal with. It's the way we relate with each other. It's how much the deepest relationship I think that two human beings can have is what I call dard ka rishta, a relationship of pain, where your pain becomes mine. Can we build bandhuta of that kind? I don't think there's any shortcut to reclaiming a world that is just equal and time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was told by Rahul that we can extend the session by 10 minutes, so
Maybe
maybe
15 minutes.
maybe 15 minutes.
But we should come back, we should reduce the coffee session by 15 minutes. Because we have a time schedule.
Okay, so that means we have little time for questions and comments. And well, I'm looking in the room. Please give a sign so that I see your hand. Unfortunately, I don't know your name. Please identify yourself and who you would like to address with your comment or question. And please be brief and precise so that more people can contribute to the discussion. Please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Irfan Ahmed, and I'm sort of an reporter here at the University in Turkey. So this is primarily to Mr. Shankar Aiyar, the party also created a Mander. So I think the idea of restoring democracy assumes rupture. That there has been something very good from which we have departed, and therefore we need to go back and restore. So rupture-oriented view of history is one way of looking at things, but a strong case can be made that what we are witnessing is not so much a departure from golden age, but a continuation. And three concrete examples are CA, which we witnessed. It has its root at the moment of partition history. Okay, I don't have time to elaborate it, but there is enough work to demonstrate it. So in that sense, it's not a departure from golden era, it is simply a continuation. 1950 ordinance, it is already based on the idea of elimination. And the third one is, of course, the anti-conversion law against caste, which Modi government is pushing forward. They have their roots in the 1950s. So I'm not sure, in short, what I'm saying is this, that do we need to restore democracy? Or do we need to create democracy? And my final point, that is also based on this idea of rupture, which Harsh had. Yes, Gandhi. So you are presenting or you are asking Muslims to take Gandhi as a cultural model, which you have not presented anything from Muslim tradition itself. Okay. Now, this is Gandhi on 28th of December, 1947. Yeah. 20th of December, 1947, just weeks before his own assassination. This is in collected volumes of Gandhi, and he's openly saying to kill Muslims. This is the quote. Hindu guy is asking that if there is a war between India and Pakistan, and Muslims of India side with Pakistan, then how do we deal with these Muslims? The assumption is that they should be sent to Pakistan. This is Gandhi's quote. Do I imagine that several crores of Muslims in India will be loyal to India and fight against Pakistan? We must not assume anyone to be bad till he has been proven to be bad. If later Muslims betray you, you can shoot them. You may shoot one or two or a certain number. Everyone will not be destroyed. you must be brave and trust the Muslims. If later they violate the trust, you can cut off their hands.
Okay, I understand.
So,
Please, we have more people in the room who would like. to-
Yeah, I'm done.
Please, you would like to respond first, and then
Should we take the questions together, maybe?
you would like to respond immediately, so.
We can indulge in wordplay. But I would say that the distinction you're drawing between rupture, disruption, and the process now, I think both those words are misplaced. What is happening is an erosion of democracy. It is an elected autocracy. The process of election is still taking place. Mr. Modi has been pictured on our front pages, picking up a large copy of the Constitution and putting his forehead to it. So, as far as he is concerned, he is using the democratic process to bring about a certain authoritarianism. So I would describe it not as a disruption of our democracy, not even as overthrowing it, but as eroding democratic institutions, eroding democratic values, while keeping democratic facade still going. And therefore, our challenge should not be on the wrong basis that we are either not a democracy or have never been a democracy, which I think was a argument. We don't have to create democracy. It was created back in 1947 and has been continued since then. But we saw in 1977 or 1975 an erosion of democracy, which democracy itself corrected. And therefore, I would rely on the democratic process to remove the distortions in values and institutions that have been brought in, rather than go off the track in saying that we have to create democracy because we were never a democracy, or to say that we have the whole system has got disrupted or ruptured. I think we have to use the same means that Modi has been using. He's been using them to create an elected autocracy. We can attempt to use the same means to have an elected democracy. And I think that is feasible as demonstrated by the outcome of the last elections, where Mr. Modi was effectively saying that he would get 63 more seats than he got last time, and had to face the humiliation of getting 63 less seats this time. And if you saw his body language on the day the results came, you see that the man was shattered. But because he's an instrument of divinity, and not a biological being, he has recovered. And yes, now God is telling him to do whatever he's doing to our country.
If I could just add a line, I think that democracy was flawed, has always been flawed. I think in most countries, democracy is flawed, but it was vibrant. It was effective. It was vibrant. It was participative. The last 10 years, I would say, more than an erosion, has seen a corrosion of democracy. And the point that I would like to underline was that however bad 1975 to 77 was, it took away our constitutional freedoms, but it was not a project of hate. When we're seeing a process in which the taking away of democratic freedoms of conscience and dissent is combined with a project of hate, it is extremely dangerous. And therefore, there is a rupture that needs to be attended to. About Gandhiji's statement, I'm unfamiliar with this statement, and Gandhiji was a human being. He may have, if he made this statement, it was a statement that needs to be opposed. But you talk about December 19th, the 20th, December 19th, just as it happens, when we did the Karwan-e-Mohabbat in Mewat, the people said you have to come to this village. And on December 19th, what had happened was that there was a massacre of Mewatis in tens of thousands, and they were all ready to go to Pakistan. Gandhiji came on December 19th and said, no, this is your country. You must stay on. And that is when the Mewatis decided to stay on. And they celebrated as a huge day of festival. So Gandhiji meant a lot to Muslim people. You listen to Irfan Habib, he was 19 years old at that time. And he says how much Gandhiji's actions at that time gave a sense of reassurance. But Gandhiji was flawed. And he did make racist statements in South Africa. I'm not here to defend, but I defend what he became, what he symbolized to me as a public voice of conscience at a time which was more or less parallel to this, is just unfolding in the same decade as the Holocaust, as the Second World War, and at a time when we could have chosen a very different path. I think Gandhiji was an extraordinary statesman. He was not a perfect human being.
Thanks so much. I have already 4 more names on the list, and I will extend the session by another 5 minutes. That means I have to close the list. I'm very sorry about that. Let's have you on the list. Let's have collect 2, and then give you a chance to respond. Then I have another 2. You are first, and then you, and then response, and then a second.
Hi, my name is Mohsen. I teach Women University of London. I really appreciate your comments, and partly it's more of a comment. It's in the spirit of the previous conversation, in context of what you said, which is that because the framing of this conference is the future of Indian democracy, I think that is a capacious framing, and I think we should appreciate that. And part of that also is to decenter our conversation. Modi matters, Delhi matters, but there are limits to it, both for good and bad reasons. And partly, as Irfan said, the tools of authoritarianism have been vetted, and many of them have existed in India's era, whether it's Kashmir or Assam. So the story of Indian democracy is complicated, and I'm sure we appreciate that, and I think it's good to sort of foreground that. And also, the defeat of Modi, or weakening, sensible weakening of Modi, may not also lead to democratizing effects, because there are different places outside Delhi that those kind of processes will be. So I hope in our conversation today and tomorrow, we just sort of accept that Delhi, and then there's a universe outside, and there could be all sorts of contradictory directions in which democracy will be eroded or secure. But that's more important.
Okay, thank you so much. There is another question from the Zoom, is that right?
Yeah, from me, actually. No, it's a very short. My name is Jay Prasad. My question is with Mr. Aiyar. So you mentioned Mohan Bhagwat's speech in your talk. So it just gets me wondering how seriously one should take that speech. How seriously would an Indian citizen, or should an Indian citizen actually take what Mohan Bhagwat said in his long speech? Was it just a pacification of some kind, or in my opinion, it was just a hogwash of many things? But should we take it seriously?
The Mohan Bhagwat speech, should it be taken seriously? Mohan Bhagwat's speech, should it be taken seriously?
I think Mohan Bhagwat's speech needs to be taken very, very serious, because it's most unusual that immediately after the election, and without any particular provocation, he should not only make that speech, but 2 of his principal lieutenants have repeated the major points. One of them in the premises of Yogi Adityanath in Gorakhpur. So I think it's a shot across the bows. It doesn't prove that he's going to act on what he said. but he does express the great sense of disappointment that prevails in the RSS and the resentment that even the BJP that they believe they've created and should function as the political wing of the party of the RSS is now saying we don't need you. So therefore, there is immense tension within the BJP, which we are not seeing, but which is obviously there, and between the RSS and the BJP. And given that the opposition has in a sense shot its boat, it's got 230 seats, what else can it do for another 5 years? So I would imagine that the threat to Modi comes much more from Mohan Bhagwat than it does from Rahul Gandhi.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I respectfully disagree strongly with Mani Shankar on this question? The hate campaign against Muslims is central to the idea of the RSS. It's been happening for 10 years. You can't suddenly wake up and say, you know, after calls for genocide have been made by members of the RSS family, when lynchings have happened, you can't suddenly wake up and say, no, we don't stand for this. I think what was quite clearly evident was that at the places that Mr. Modi made the worst hate speeches is where they lost the greatest degree of electoral support. The RSS was coming in with a kind of dealing with the consequences of, and it's very, one of the things it has always done is to speak in multiple voices. So for this, you'll speak with a moderate voice. Here you have a Vajpayee, you have someone, here you have someone. This was just to appease those who were put off by the vulgarity of his hate speech. But it is not a reversal of the project of the RSS. Very far from it, and therefore I don't hold it as significant.
Okay, thank you. So the last two hands, gentlemen in the first row, and then you.
Thank you, Theodor Aktiva. I would like to benefit from your experience, Mani Shankar. You turned to the distinction to be made between North and South when it comes to the fight on Hindutva and so forth. Do you think that thinking institution-wise, the Rajya Sabha could play an effective role in emerging this effective opposition, parliamentarian opposition against Modi?
Would you like to add, please?
Thank you so much for these very fine talks. I'm Lalit Vachali. I'm from the University of Göttingen. I'm a filmmaker and researcher. My question and actually comment is to Mr. Mani Shankar Aiyar. That is, you know, there are a lot of things that you say that are so important in terms of the RSS-BJP tensions. But just to clarify one point, I was, you know, just to share with you the information, I was filming Indian elections in West Bengal. And what I found was there was an absolutely concerted kind of effort in terms of Modi's hate speech. The other BJP leaders putting it out, and RSS rank and file taking it out to Hindu households. So, I mean, this is in sync with what Harsh was saying, and gentleman here was also saying, in terms of do we take Mohan Bhagwat's speech carefully, I mean, seriously? My feeling is that if the BJP had got 30 more seats, you know, Mohan Bhagwat may not have been making these utterances. And the other point here that I want to say is that there is definitely, I think this is very central in terms of what is the role of the RSS in terms of looking at the future of Indian democracy, because they pretty much seem to be here to stay. Thank you so much.
I must clarify that the questions seem to be tangential to the point that I was making. I was not suggesting that there is a divide in the larger objectives of the RSS and the BJP. What I was suggesting was that the RSS does not like being abandoned. And Mr. Modi has been abandoning it. So has Mr. Mander in saying that they don't matter because we have got more cadres than the RSS has. And it is, and the BJP has other candidates who will pursue the same objectives as the RSS, but in their view, more effectively, more efficient. And the lead candidate, the alternative candidate they have, is Mr. Gadkari, whose electoral base is in the headquarters of the RSS in Nagpur. And he has been made some years ago the president of the BJP by the RSS. And I drew attention to the fact that when there was ideological deviation by Vajpayee and later by Jaswant Singh and later by L.K. Advani, the RSS simply dumped them. And they've lost their political relevance in consequence. So if the BJP decides that their objectives will be better served by someone other than Mr. Modi, I don't think they're going to observe the Marquis of Queensberry rules in continuing to support a man who is openly contemptuous of where he came from. And he may be driven to make compromises that are not natural to him. But he has to keep the coalition together. He has to keep the country together. There are real challenges which he has not shown that he is either personally or ideologically capable of handling on his own. And as I tried to indicate, I think when he finds that the attack from the rear is getting unbearable, he'll say, in that case, I go to the country, in the hope that the same thing will happen to him as happened to Vajpayee in 1999, when Vajpayee was defeated by a single vote on the floor of the House. He went to the people and they gave him a very large majority. So that is what I was hinting at, that it seems to me to be more likely that there's mutiny on the bounty, which will bring about the end of Modi, than any further attempts by the Congress within the next 5 years. 5 years from now, I don't know what will happen. But I was talking about the future of democracy under Mr. Modi. And I have in the process forgotten your question.
Ranchia Sama, but it can play a.
Acha Sama?
No, you have Sabah.
Rajya Sabha.
The upper house.
Rajya Sabha, if it can be.
Oh, yes, very good question. Very, very good question. There are many imaginative ways of handling this issue of how do you reconcile the fundamental principle of one person, one vote, which informs all electoral democracy, with the demographic problem that we have. The United States was faced with a similar situation because they had very small populations in the original Commonwealth in the northeast of India, compared to the vast acreages that they acquired subsequently. So if you look at Arizona, which is well represented in this meeting, or you look at Texas, you look at California, in terms of population and size, they're far greater than tiny little Maine and tiny little Rhode Island and even tiny little Massachusetts. So they resolved it by having a Senate which was not a double-standing body, but an essential part of the Constitution, and said that all provinces will have equal membership in the Senate. Now, our Rajya Sabha is not conceived in the same way as the Senate is. It's conceived much more like the House of Lords, with the exception that whereas the House of Lords consisted of hereditary peers, and now it has life peers too, it was not an elected body. So what we said was that we give elected seats, but in relationship to population, to the different areas. So the kind of representation we have in the Rajya Sabha is almost the same as the kind of representation we have in the Lok Sabha. So it is theoretically possible that we can give more seats to the deprived southern states in the upper house. But will that satisfy them? Does the Rajya Sabha have the same legislative authority as the Lok Sabha has? Furthermore, the Senate is entitled to overrule the House of Representatives. And most of the key battles are debated in the House of Representatives, but they are decided in the Senate. And in any case, the president, who is the executive chief, does not belong to Congress. He doesn't belong to the House of Representatives. He doesn't belong to the House of Lords. But in India, you really effectively have to be a member of the Lok Sabha to be a prime minister. You can temporarily take it from somewhere else. And Manmohan Singh did succeed in 10 years. But I think this problem cannot be resolved unless we decide to adopt the American system of equal representation in the Senate, and the Senate being more powerful legislatively than the House of Representatives. Now that might be Modi's mind, because he has indicated that he prefers a presidential system. So although he's built himself a palace on the grounds of the presidential palace, I think his eyes are at the top of the hill, and he may decide that the way in which we're going to resolve this issue is to chuck out the British system and bring in the American system. And he will be a most powerful president who cannot be removed except by impeachment, and leave the legislatures to do what they want. I don't know what he'll do, but I do know that he has a very major challenge coming from southern dissatisfaction, which will get aggravated by the 2026 census. And Mr. Modi has not so far indicated even an awareness of the problem, let alone the kind of imaginative solution you have suggested.
Dr. Mander, I think you deserve to rise.
Just a line, I think we kept you away. Responding to some of what I'm saying, I don't think the crisis, the civilizational crisis in which India finds itself is going to be resolved primarily by electoral sort of this party, that party. It is a civilizational crisis, it's a societal crisis. The battle of India is not against the BJP, but against the RSS. And the RSS's ideology. And I think that what I call radical love is not an ephemeral idea. We have to rebuild a society, fight the ideology of the RSS, which has electoral victories can give us a little more elbow room. But if the electoral outcomes of this election were unfavorable to Mr. Modi, it was not as if the battle of the radicalization of the Hindu heart and mind would have been overcome. It would have just given us that much more opportunity to fight this. So I feel we talk too much about how to fight this through the electoral system. It is a societal problem that we must address. It's a civilization problem that must be addressed. That's my.
Okay, thank you so much. I apologize that only male participants had the chance to comment and contribute to the discussion. I'm very sorry about that. I have closed the list before you raised your hand, but I hope you can contribute to the discussion during the coffee break and the rest of the conference. And with that, I would like to close the hand. And please join me in giving a big hand to